Okay, so my name is Katja Mäkkylä and I'm a researcher here at Kela. And I'm going to study, and I have already started to study, the media coverage of the Basic Income Experiment. So, as it has already been said, that this experiment has been exceptional in many ways, and it has generated a lot of interest all around the world. And the media coverage of the experiment has been remarkable before, during, and after the experiment. And Kela, as well as the other Finnish experts in basic income issues, have received a lot of interview requests from many international media outlets. And those media outlets have been curious to know more about the experiment. And of course, they have been also really curious about they have been willing to interview especially those participants of the experiment. Kela, of course, did not give any information on the experiments, on the participants, but, well, the reporters, they have had their own ways to find the participants. And some of them have been interviewed for several times during the experiment. And I think we could say that those experiences that those participants have given and have told about and how they have described their life after they received the basic income have shaped also the idea of the basic income before the preliminary results came out. Well, it has also been very useful to provide some information about the Finnish social security system for those visitors and for the media reporters, and describe also how the basic income experiment is integrated into it. So even though the results, the preliminary results have been maybe a delusion for some international media outlets, it's still true that for many visitors and for many reporters, Finland appears as a bold innovator and country that has actively sought solution for the biggest challenges of the modern societies. And for this reason, it has had a positive impact on the country image of Finland. So Finland has been seen as a country leading the way in social innovations. Okay, that was some background information about the media attention in general. But what I'm going to study is how the basic income is discussed in the experiment. The Finnish experiment is discussed in public. And first of all, I will study the intensity of the discussion, and then the media frames, how the basic income is framed, and how the Finnish experiment have been framed in international media and in Finnish media. And I will tell more about these media frames later. I will also study the participants of the discussion, especially when it comes to the social media and Twitter. It is curious to see if they are just politicians or activists or some experts who discuss about this topic, or if there are also so-called regular citizens who discuss on this topic. And also, I would like to study the effects of the discussion. This is, of course, quite difficult to measure the effects of some kind of a public discussion. But, well, maybe with the media frames, I could find some ways to find also the effects. Well, as a data, I have two kind of a data. I will use the traditional media data, which is basically the online news articles, and then these international online newspapers and also in Finnish newspapers. Of course, I have some limits because I do not speak Korean or Japanese, so I can't find they are basically in English or some other European language that I understand when it comes to the international media. And then I have also another data, which is Twitter data, and I will collect this data from the Twitter using the Twitter APIs. So a little bit about this media framing. So this is my main method that I will use, and from this collected data, and this especially when it comes to the traditional media, I will study the different ways in which the basic income and the Finnish experiment are framed in media, and then I will use these frames to analyze which aspects of the experiment of the basic income are emphasized and which maybe are disregarded. What may be the contradictions between these different frames and who creates the frames, which are the possible effects of the frames. So here I can maybe find some effects as well. Also, what are the motivations behind the frames? It's also important to say that media frames are not the same as the audience frames. So media can frame some issues in some way, but of course then there is an audience an audience can also have different kind of interpretations. Maybe they do not interpret the issue the same way the media does. So this is also one of the reasons why it is not so easy to measure the effects. I have studied so far some of the articles in international online newspapers, and I have found these, let's say, preliminary results. They may be changed when I'm going to study more of my data. But the most prominent frames are the economic frame, the conflict frame, the future frame, and the human impact frame. Economic frame, basic income is, of course, first and foremost the issue that concerns the livelihood and basic and income distribution in society, and so it's natural that it's frequently framed as an economic issue. And also because the Finnish experiment was studying the impact of basic income on employment. So the conflict frame, it's a typical frame used in newspapers, and it emphasizes the disagreement between different parties. And in this case, when it comes to basic income, it's often there are those who are for basic income and those who are against it. And in these articles that I have studied, many times those who are against are, for example, trade unions, and the newspapers the reporters have interviewed representatives of trade unions, which are telling why the basic income is not going to work. The future frame, it's maybe I don't know if it's the most prominent, but frame, not maybe the second actually, used frame in international media, because this basic income is seen as a solution for the challenges faced with the automatization and robotization of the work. And I think this is the reason why also the main reason why basic income experiment has gained so much attention around the world and in other countries, because basic income is usually discussed in this frame. And The fourth frame is a human impact frame, and it focuses on describing how the issue affects the individuals and groups. And almost every article that I have studied, there is almost always a brief story of one or two participants. Like I said before, the media reporters, they have been really curious to know about hear about the stories of those participants. And they have told their own stories and how the basic income has influenced on their own lives, what kind of influence it has had. I think this frame makes the basic income more personal and more comprehensible also for those people who are not experts in the issue. So for the larger public, I would say. Okay, then what else we are going to study? So we are going to study also the public discussion on the results of the basic of the experiment. So now in 2 weeks we are going, or in 1 week we are going to have the elections, parliamentary elections, and the social security reform is one of the issues that is been discussed, of course, and there are some parties who are promoting basic income or promoting a new experiment. So it is curious to see also the study this discussion and the discussion on the results that we are having now and also in future. Then finally, we are also planning to conduct survey on attitudes towards basic income, and there have been some surveys before, and one was, I don't know, maybe Olli could correct me if I'm wrong, but one was conducted before the experiment, right? I think so, yes. And so we are going to have a new survey. Okay, so that was all. Thank you all. If you have any questions.
Questions for Katja here. Don't run away yet.
I was hoping nobody had.
I'm sure we have a question here somewhere. Yes. It's coming. It's coming.
This is perhaps too much in detail, but until the 90s, correspondents in Helsinki were mainly on salary and they had time to investigate. And these days, most foreign media employ freelancers who have to sell their stories. And particularly in this case, there were horrid examples of what happened. In your study, have you been able to ascertain whether an item has been actually a media originated staff item or just a freelance thing sold from Finland? Because when they get reported here in Finland in the news, they describe also the freelancers as correspondent of the Observer or something like that. You got my question?
Not really, actually.
There are two ways when the ways of stories being originated in Finland: a freelancer selling an item to a foreign media, or a salaried correspondent to living comfortably in Helsinki and having time to investigate and consider what is true and what is not.
I think that I think Miska has been giving a lot of interviews, so Miska actually knows where they are coming from. I think they are, many of them have been also freelance journalists coming from different countries, but I don't know how. There are also some Finnish journalists who had written news stories about this. I don't know. Miska can maybe. He has been giving a lot of interviews, so
maybe just a quick comment. I think it's a really interesting question if how the dynamics of the media business is affecting how these things are being written in the media, and definitely it would be interesting to look at it. We haven't thought about that I think. But yeah, in this experiment, well, during this experiment we have witnessed quite a few, how would I say, well, cases of misinterpretation, and it would be really on what's happening in Finland, for example. So it would be really interesting to look at in more detail on the reasons why these misinterpreted facts have gone to the until the international media. Yeah.
Okay, the second question over here.
This might be irrelevant, but because there's so much political interest of this, and it's also based about the context where the media coming from. Have you noticed some kind of differences between different international medias, depending what country they are coming, and comparing to our national discussion about that?
Yeah, sure. There are differences between, and of course, in Finland, maybe the newspapers, they do not have that much of a political. How do you say that? They are not. They are not the political newspapers, but for example, I can see that I have studied some articles in the Independent, that's the British newspapers, which have been like a really positive coverage of the basic income in general. So it depends also, maybe also the context about the country, but also the different newspapers have different kind of a coverage of the issue, depending what are the political ideas behind.
Thank you, Katja.